Hi everyone, Kevin here. Today, we're going to build our very first automation workflow step by step using UiPath. UiPath is the enterprise platform for agentic automation, bringing together AI agents, robots, and people so organizations can turn fragmented processes into end-to-end intelligent workflows that think, act, and adapt. In fact, the UiPath platform, together with its Maestro orchestration layer, was just named one of Time's best inventions of 2025 for redefining how automation and AI work together. In this video, we'll build a simple invoice approval solution to show you how UiPath can handle the boring stuff, add intelligence with AI, and even ask for human approval before completing a task. By the end, you'll have your own automation up and running. And even though we'll just focus on this one example, the skills you learn here will apply to almost any workflow you want to automate. Let's dive in. To get started, head to the UiPath website. You'll see a link right down below, and then click on Try UiPath for free in the top right-hand corner. You can follow along using the UiPath Community Edition, which is completely free to use. If you need to collaborate with others, or maybe just want a few extra features, there's also a free Automation Cloud standard trial. With this video, we'll stick with the Community Edition. Go ahead, create your account, and I'll see you once you're signed in. After you sign in, you'll land here on the UiPath Automation Cloud dashboard. From here, you can access all the key parts of the UiPath ecosystem. First up, we have Studio, and this is where you can build different automation types: robotic, agentic, and API, using a powerful, governed, low-code environment designed for both business and pro developers. Next to that, we have agents, and this is where you manage your AI agents. When you want to build one, you'll use the agent builder in Studio. Next to that, we have Maestro. This is the orchestration engine that runs and coordinates your agentic processes behind the scenes, making sure AI agents, robots, and human approvals work together smoothly. For this video, we'll be working in Studio Web, which lets us build directly in the browser. No installs required. Let's click on this option right here. This drops us into the UiPath Studio Web workspace. At the top, you'll see three different tabs. We have Workspace, and then over here, we have Templates. Workspace is where your own projects live, and templates are ready-made automations you can use as a starting point. To create a new workflow from scratch, down below, let's click on Create New. On this screen, UiPath asks us what kind of project we want to build, and you'll see a few different options. In this video, we're going to build an agentic process, a complete end-to-end flow that brings together AI agents, robots, and people. One thing that's great about UiPath is that it's open and vendor agnostic. You're not locked into using only UiPath tools. Instead, you can integrate and orchestrate your first-party and third-party automations and AI agents in UiPath Maestro. Right over here, let's click on Agentic Process. What you're looking at here is the canvas. This is where we design the steps in our process. Think of it like a flow chart that shows what happens from start all the way to the finish. On the left-hand side, you'll see the Explorer panel. This lists all the parts of your project. Right now, we have just one process. In the middle is the main design area, where every automation begins with a start event. We'll connect new steps here as we build out the workflow. And over here on the right-hand side, there's a panel called Autopilot, an AI-powered assistant that helps you generate activities, map data, or build parts of your workflow. You simply use natural language to describe what you want, and UiPath Autopilot will help you create the process automatically. To help you understand the basics, we're going to build this workflow from scratch. So let's start by adding the first step to our workflow. In this project, we're building an agentic process that reads new invoices from Google Drive and extracts their details with AI and decides whether to approve them automatically or send them to a human for review. By doing this, you'll see many of the core elements of UiPath in action: AI agents that are goal-driven, reason through context, and adapt as they work; RPA workflows that handle deterministic, rule-based tasks and UI automation; and human-in-the-loop approvals that keep you in control. First, we need to set up the start event, which tells UiPath when the agentic process should run. I want this agentic process to run anytime I upload a new PDF to Google Drive. Right here on the canvas, let's click on Start Event, and then over on the right-hand side, you'll see this wrench icon. Let's click on that to open up the Properties panel, and here we see all the different properties of the Start Event. At the very top, we could enter in a more descriptive name. Here, I'll enter in New Invoice Uploaded. That way, I know what will kick off this process. Let's now go down to where we have the action. And here we have one option, wait for connector event. I'll select that. A connector event is just a way for another app, like say Gmail or Salesforce, to tell UiPath that something happened. So your agentic process can start right away. In my case, when I upload a new invoice in Google Drive, I want this process to kick off. So right down below, let's select the connector. I'll click on this, and here we see all these different services that we can connect to, and that can kick off our process. But again, I'm looking for Google Drive. So right here, I see Google Drive. I'll select that option. Now that I've set up Google Drive as the connector, I need to establish a connection between UiPath and Google Drive. I'll click here, and I don't have any existing connections yet. So right over here, let's click on the plus icon to add a new connection. On this screen, let's click on Connect. Next, you'll need to sign into your Google account. I'll go ahead and do that and then sign in. And right over there, I can see that I've now established a connection with my Google account. Next up, I need to define the trigger. This is what's going to start the agentic process. When I click on this, we have all sorts of different options. I'm going to upload a new invoice file into Google Drive. So that's going to be a new file created. I'll select this option. Now let's scroll down a little bit, and we have a few more items that we need to fill in here. First, we need to tell it what folder to look at in Google Drive for these new invoice files. Over here, I'll click on this, and I can see the root folder of my Google Drive. Let's click into My Drive. And right here, I see a number of different folders in my drive. If you'd like to follow along, feel free to set up your own invoices folder in Google Drive, and then you could select that. So over here, I'll select my invoices folder and then click on Save. Now that we've defined the folder that UiPath should watch, we can also add in a filter. I'll click on this. Now, we only upload PDF files into this folder, so I want to make sure that it's only a PDF file. Right over here, I'll click on Add Condition, and we have all sorts of different options. Now, my file extension will be a PDF. So over here, I'll select File Extension. Then let's click on the operand list. And here we have different options. I want to select equals, and over here, let's set it to PDF. Then, down in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save. Finally, let's look at the very bottom where we have a section titled Output. This is the information that we want to get back when a new file is uploaded into this folder. Let's click on Add New. This opens up a prompt where we can add a variable. Basically, we want some information about the file that was uploaded into Google Drive so we could work with it. We could pull out details, and then we could decide whether we want to approve or reject that file. But again, we need to know what type of file we're working with. So right up on top, let's add our first variable. Probably be good to know the file name that we're working with. And right here, we could choose the type. We have a few different options, and this is a string. It's just a name. And down below, we could select the value. When I click on value, this opens up all sorts of different information that we get back in the response from Google Drive when a new invoice is uploaded. If I scroll down a little bit, here I see all the different details. And if I look down towards the bottom, we have one titled the name or the file name. I'll select this, and this is our first variable. Down below, I'll click on Save. We know the file name now, but we also want some additional information. So again, let's add another variable. I'll click on this. And next, it'd probably be helpful to know the file ID or a unique identifier telling us which file was just uploaded. Down below again, we have all the different types, and this is the string. I'll select that. And over here, let's select the value. And again, I can see the response that we get back from Google Drive. And if I scroll down just a little bit, here we have a field titled ID. So I'll select that, and then let's click on Save. We have the name, we also have the ID, but I'd like one more piece of information to make sure that we're working with the correct file. So let's click on Add New. And for this third one, I would like the URL of the file. Right down below, I have all the different types. This is a string, and then let's click on Value. And once again, let's look at the response that we're getting back from Google Drive. And here we have the option for URL. I'll select that, and down below, let's click on Save. Now that we set this up, UiPath will automatically detect any new invoice that we upload into Google Drive, and it'll also pull out the name, the ID of the file, and the URL. But let's actually test it out just to make sure that it's working as we expect it to. Let's jump over into Google Drive. Here I am now in Google Drive in my invoices folder. I'm going to upload a sample invoice. Let's drop that in. If you'd like to follow along, I have a link to this invoice PDF file down below in the description. Now that I've uploaded this file, let's go back to UiPath. To test the agentic process so far, up on top we have a button that says Debug. You can also press the F5 key. Let's click on this. In the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save and Debug. And look at that, we got a green check mark letting us know that it ran successfully. Right down below, let's click on this process step, and over on the right-hand side, we can see all of the global variables that we get back. Right here, we have the file name or invoice001.pdf. Here we have the URL of the file, and we also have the unique ID associated with this file. So it looks like it found the invoice just like we would expect it to. Right up on top, let's go back into design mode. As you build out your agentic process, it's always a good idea to debug just to ensure that everything's working how you expect it to. Next, we'll connect our agentic process to the RPA workflow that does the deterministic heavy lifting, downloading the invoice and extracting all of its details. To download the invoice and extract the details, we're going to insert what's called an RPA step. RPA stands for Robotic Process Automation. If you haven't heard of that before, RPA is software that does repetitive computer tasks for you the same way a person would. Now, for this next step, let's insert a task. So let's click on this first step here, and you should see this overlay where you could insert the next item in the flow. Over here, let's insert a task. Like I said, it's like we're building a flowchart here. To edit the properties of this task, just like we did earlier, make sure that this item is selected in the flowchart. Then over on the right-hand side, let's click on this wrench icon, and that opens up the properties panel. Let's start by giving this task a name. Right here, I'll call this download and extract invoice details. Next, let's go down to the action dropdown. I'll click on this and you'll notice that we have all sorts of different actions. This is an RPA workflow. And right here, we see an option for start and wait for RPA workflow. That means that the main process will call this robot, let it run, and then wait for its results before continuing. Let's select this. Next, let's select an RPA automation. I'll click on this and you'll notice we don't have one yet. That's because we need to build it. So over here, let's click on plus resource to add this. This drops us into the RPA workflow editor. And right here, we can build the RPA flow. But before we do that, we need to define what information we're going to pass to this step, and then also what information we expect to get from this, or the inputs and the outputs. Over on the left-hand side, we have this side menu. Let's click on this one titled Open Data Manager. For this RPA workflow, we want to download an invoice and extract the details. We need to tell it what invoice we would like to do it for. So we need to pass in an input, or basically the file URL. Let's click on this plus icon, and right here, we can enter in an argument. So over here, I'll type in the file URL. Here, we could choose the direction. We're sending this information in, so I'll select in. And for the type, this is text, it's just a URL. And then that's all good for the input, so over here, we can minimize that. Next, we need to define the output, or what information we want to get back from this step. Now, ideally, I'd like to know the invoice date, the invoice number, the total amount due, and also the vendor name. That'll help us evaluate whether we should approve or reject the invoice. To add an output, I'll hover over this, and here we see a plus icon to add a new item. I'll click on this, and here we can add the first piece of output. For this one, I'll enter in the invoice date, and we want to get this information from this step. So for the direction, I'll make sure to select out. Now, for the type, let's click on this, and we have the option for date with time. I'll select that, and we can leave everything else as is. Now, let's go up above, and let's add another piece of output. I'll click on the plus icon, and for this one, I'd like to get the invoice number. We want to get that out. And here I could select the type. Now you might be thinking an invoice number is a number, but oftentimes you'll have letters and other information included as part of that. So text is the best choice. Now, if we go up a little bit more, let's go back and add yet another item. And for this one, I'm going to call it the invoice amount. In this dropdown, let's click on this, and this is a number. I'll select that, and we're also sending this out. Let's go back up, and we're going to add the final one. I'll click on the plus icon, and for this one, I'll call this the vendor name. We're going to send it out, and for this one, this is text. Now, we can minimize each one of these, and if we look now, we have 4 pieces of output that we're going to get back after running this RPA step. Now that we've defined all of the inputs and the outputs, we need to ensure that the Google Drive file URL is being assigned to this input variable. To do that, on the left-hand side, let's open up the File Explorer, and right here, let's go back to the agentic process by clicking on this option. On the canvas, let's click into Download and Extract Invoice Details, or the RPA step. And right here, we see all the different properties. Now, right down here, you can see the input that we just defined, the file URL, but you'll notice that there's no value currently assigned to it. We need to take the file URL from this previous step and assign it to this input variable. So let's click right here, and look at that. We get this smart suggestion right at the top to insert the file URL. Now, you could also look through this list, and here too, I also see the file URL, but this is handy that it surfaces it at the top of the list. I'll select the file URL. So now we're taking the file URL from this first step, and we're feeding it into the input variable for the RPA step. That's perfect. Let's now jump back into the RPA workflow. Over here, I'll click on Main. Now we can start building out the RPA workflow. To do that, let's click on this plus icon to add the first activity. And here we could browse by category, lots of different options. I want to download or get the file from Google Drive. So over here, let's search for Drive. And here I see a number of different actions that I can choose from. Let's scroll through here, and I see an option for Get File or Folder. That sounds perfect, so let's select that. Right up on top, I can now specify the file or the folder. And when I click on this, this opens up a file picker. Of course, the file is going to change every single time we upload a new invoice. So let's click out of the file picker, and over on the right-hand side, let's click on See More. And instead of using the file picker, we want to feed in the URL or the ID from the previous step. Now, if you remember, we defined that as an input into the RPA workflow. Now it says file or folder URL or ID. Now let's click on this, and here we see all the different variables. And right up on top, I have the file URL. Let's select that. Now, every time a new file is uploaded, the first step will pass in the file URL into this step, and we'll be able to fetch this specific file. Now that we've downloaded this file, the next step is to extract all of the details from the invoice. Let's add another activity. I'll click on this plus icon, and here again, we have all these different options. Let's try typing in extract document data. Right there, we see that UiPath offers something called document understanding, extracts data from a document and stores the results. That looks like exactly what we need. So I'll click on this. And here, that's now added another step. But if we look here, it says document understanding is not enabled on this tenant. Please enable it from the admin section and reload the project. So let's go ahead and enable this first. Before we can extract invoice data, we need to make sure document understanding is turned on for our tenant. Document understanding is part of UiPath IXP, or Intelligent Extraction and Processing. This extracts key insights and data from structured and unstructured content and turns it into automation-ready data that flows directly into your agentic processes. To do that, up in the top left-hand corner, let's click on the waffle menu, and then let's go to the admin center. Let's click here. On this screen, let's click on the tenant, and then over on the right-hand side, let's click on services. In the top right-hand corner, let's click on add service. Right here, you should see an option for document understanding. Make sure to check that. And then down here at the bottom, let's click on add. And right here, we can now see that document understanding has been enabled. And you only have to do this once. This will be available for any future projects that you work on. Let's now go back to Studio Web. In the top left-hand corner, let's click on the product launcher. And right here, let's click back into Studio. Within Studio, let's click back into our solution. I'll click on this. Right over here, we can now select the input, or basically the file that we want to extract document data from. I'll click on this, and we have all sorts of different options. But right up on top, I see the file or the folder that we downloaded in the previous step. So I'll click on this. Next, we need to choose the document understanding project. And we have two options, predefined and generative predefined. Now, predefined uses UiPath's built-in models for common documents, things like invoices and receipts. Now, we're working with invoices, so I think this is a good match. Now, this works right out of the box, and it doesn't require any extra setup. So I'll select predefined. Next, we need to choose the extractor. And when I click on this, you'll notice that you could extract all types of different information from documents. I want to extract information from an invoice. So over here, I'll make sure to select invoices. Now that we've extracted all of the details from the invoice, the next step is to assign those extracted values into those variables that we created at the beginning, or the output variables, and then we'll send them back to the agentic process. So let's scroll all the way to the bottom, and we're going to create another activity. Let's click here. This opens up a dialog, and we want to assign a variable value. So right up on top, let's type in assign variable value, and here we see an activity. Let's select this. Let's now scroll to the bottom of the page. Let's now select one of our output variables. I'll click on this dropdown, and right at the top, we have the option for invoice amount. Let's start there, and then we'll work through all the others. I'll select this. Now, we need to set it to a value. I'll click on this, and here we see all the extracted document data. So let's click on Show More, expand document data, and here let's expand data. And what's really impressive here is you can see all of the data that UiPath's AI is pulling out of the invoice. So here we could select any of this data right here. That's so cool. Now again, we want to get the total amount, and I see total amount right here. Of course, I can't just select this. This is a container of additional data. So let's expand this. And here we have value, confidence, and some other items. Let's expand value. And here we have the actual invoice amount, or the total value. I'll select this. Then let's click out. It looks like we're getting an error. Right over here, if I hover over the exclamation mark, it looks like it's trying to assign from the type double to an integer. That implies that I made a mistake with the data type. So over on the left-hand side, let's click on the data manager. And down here, we have the invoice amount. Let's expand this output variable. And right here, you see that I set it to a type of number. Basically, that means that there are no decimals, but I'm guessing that the invoice has decimal data that's being sent back. So let's expand all these different data types. And right here, we have the option for number with decimal. That's more appropriate for this data. So let's select that and then click right back over here. And it appears now that that error message went away. So we made a mistake with the data type. So anytime you get an error, UiPath will present a nice error message to help you pinpoint what the problem is. Let's now assign all of the other variables. Down below, I'll click on Add Activity, and just like we did earlier, search for Assign Variable Value, and let's click on this option. Then let's scroll down. Here, let's choose the next variable, and let's go with the invoice date, and then let's click here. That opens up a date picker, not what we're looking for, so let's click out. Over on the right-hand side, let's click on See More, and let's select Variables. Just like we saw earlier, we can assign it to a value that we get back from the document. So let's expand this, click on Show More, expand document data, expand data, and now we're looking for the invoice date. Here I see the date, let's expand that. And right here, I see the value. And right down here, I see the actual date value. So let's select this. And there, we've now assigned the date to the date that we get back from the invoice. Let's now do the same thing for the last two output variables. Let's add an activity, set a variable value. And here we'll scroll down. Let's click on this. Next, we have the invoice number. I'll select that. And then let's set it to a value. Right over here, just like we've been doing, expand, extract document data. Let's click on Show More, expand document data, expand data. And now we're looking for the invoice number. Here I see the invoice number. Let's expand that. And right here, I see the value. I'll select this, and then let's click out. That looks good. And finally, let's do it for the last output variable. Down below, I'll click Add Activity, set variable value, and let's go down, click on this, and let's select the invoice vendor name. I'll select that. And then let's click on Set Value. And if we go up the top, we have Extract Document Data. Let's expand that. Expand Show More. Expand Document Data. Expand Data. And right here, I see the vendor name. That's exactly what I'm looking for. So let's expand that. And right here, let's go with the value for the vendor name. And let's click out of that. And we've now assigned all of the different output variables. Good job. Now that we've assigned all of the output variables, let's go back to our agentic process. Over on the left-hand side, let's open the Project Explorer. And right here, we see the process. Let's click on that. Just like we did earlier, let's now test this out to make sure that everything is working as we expect it to. Right up on top, let's click on the Debug button, or simply press F5 on your keyboard. It looks like it ran successfully. Down at the bottom, we can see all the different global variables. And if I scroll down a little bit, here it looks like we have the total amount due. We also have the invoice date. Here we have the invoice number, and then we also have the vendor name, Cookie Supply Co. So it looks like it's successfully extracted all of that data from the invoice, and then it places it into these different output variables that we created. It's all working just like we expected to. At the very top, let's jump back into design mode. Now that the robot has extracted all of the invoice details, the next step is to let our AI agent decide what to do next. To add an agent, let's click on the last step, and right up on top, we can add another task to this flow. Then, with this new task selected, over on the right-hand side, let's open up the Properties panel. And first off, we could give it a name. I'm going to call this the Invoice Decision Agent. Then down below, let's select the action type. Here we have all these different options. Let's go with Start and Wait for Agent. I'll select that. This means that the agentic process will pause here, send the extracted data from the invoice to the AI agent, and then wait for its response before it continues through the flow. Back on the right-hand side, we can select an agent. Of course, we haven't built an agent yet, so we need to do that. Right over here, let's click on the plus icon next to Resource, and this will now allow us to create an agent. On this screen, we could choose the agent type, autonomous or conversational. I want it to just operate on its own and make decisions, so I'll go with autonomous. Then down below, I can describe what I want the agent to do. So here I'll type in a description. You are an AI assistant designed to process invoice data and determine approval status based on specific rules, and we'll provide those later. So this agent will analyze the different invoice fields and then decide whether to approve or reject, and also give a reason for that decision. Down below, let's click on Generate Agent. UiPath opens up the autopilot over on the right-hand side to help us build our agent, but I'd like to do it manually, so for now, I'm going to close out of this pane. This drops us into the Agent Builder, and this is where we're going to define how our AI agent thinks and also makes decisions. But before we do that, we need to define the inputs, or what we're sending in to the agent, and what we'd like to get back, similar to what we did with the RPA step. Over on the left-hand side, let's open up the Data Manager. In the input section, we want to pass in all the data that we get back from the RPA workflow. Let's hover over inputs, and right over here, we see an add property button. Let's click on that, and right here, we can give a name to the first property. Now click on this, and let's call this the invoice date. For the type, this is the date time. Now select that, and let's make it required. Let's add another input. Click on the plus icon. Right down below, let's call this the invoice vendor name. This is a string, and I'll make this required. Up on top, let's add another property, and let's go down. Right here, let's change the name, and I'll call this the invoice number, and this is a string, and let's make that required. And let's add the fourth input. Right up above, let's add another property, and if we scroll down here, let's change the name. And for this one, this is the invoice amount, and that's a number, so I'll select that. Let's also make this one required. I'll check that. Now that we've defined all of the inputs, I would also like to get information back from the agent. We're going to feed in an invoice, and then the agent's going to decide whether to accept or reject the invoice. And I'd also like to know the reason for why the agent made that decision. So we need two pieces of output. Right down here, there's a placeholder for content. We don't need that, so let's remove that output. Hovering over outputs, here I see the option to add a new output property. I'll click on this, and then let's scroll down a little bit, and we could give a name to the first property we want to get back from this agent. So I'll click on this icon, and first I'd like to know the status, accept or reject. This is type string, and over here I could type in a description. So let's type something in. Status of the invoice, approve or review. Then let's go back up to outputs and add one more. So over here, I'll click on the plus icon and scroll down a little bit, and let's give it a name. For this one, I'll call this the reason. And then in the description field, let's type in reason for the status decision. That looks good. Now that we've set up all of our inputs and outputs, the next step is to map the data that we get back from the RPA workflow to all of these different inputs. To do that, over on the left-hand side, let's open up the Project Explorer, and then let's jump back into the process. On the canvas, let's click on the invoice decision agent, and over on the right-hand side, this opens up all of the properties. And right down here, we see all of the inputs that we just set up. Let's now map all of these inputs to the data that we get back from this step, download and extract invoice details. When I click on invoice date, here I see all the different variables, and there I see the previous step with download and extract invoice details. If I scroll down just a little bit, here I see the invoice date. I'll select that. Here I see the vendor name. Let's click into that. And we also want to map this. Here I see the vendor name. Let's select that. Invoice number. Let's scroll down and there's invoice number. And lastly, we have the invoice amount. I'll click on that. Let's scroll down and let's assign this to invoice amount. That looks good. Now that we've defined all of the inputs and the outputs, the next step is to configure the agent. Back over on the left-hand side in the Project Explorer, let's click on the agent. At the very top, you can see the system prompt. This is the agent's core set of instructions. It explains what the agent's job is, how to interpret the data, and the logic it should follow when deciding whether to approve or review an invoice. Now, let's enter in the prompt. I'll highlight this text, and here, let me enter in my prompt. Now, feel free to pause this if you'd like to read through it. At a very high level, I describe what the agent's role is, and then I've also included some rules for processing. So in which case would we simply approve an invoice, and in which case would we want a human to review it? Then I also included some information on what type of information to return once the agent has a chance to review an invoice. Underneath that, we have the user prompt, and this is where we pass in the actual data from the invoice. So over here, I'll enter in my prompt, process the following invoice data, and then I call out the invoice vendor name, the number, the date, and the amount. Now, you'll notice that I have these values in curly brackets. These are the inputs that we defined over here in the data manager. This serves as a placeholder. So when UiPath runs this, it'll insert the actual input values in. So we'll have the vendor name, the actual invoice number, the date, and also the invoice amount. In this example, I'm keeping the agent's rules simple, but it can also handle more ambiguous cases, like missing or conflicting fields, or maybe unusually formatted invoices. Agents can handle those scenarios really well. If we scroll down a little bit, you'll also see options for tools, contexts, and also escalations. Tools let the agents take actions. Contexts give it extra information that it can look up. And escalations let the agent hand things off to a human when needed. Now, we don't need these for our example, so I'm going to leave them as is. Before we move on, it's always a good idea to test the agent to make sure that it's following all of the logic and instructions that we defined. UiPath makes this easy with something called evaluation sets. We've been in the definition view of an agent. Over on the left-hand side in the Project Explorer, you can see that we're in the agent view, and this is the definition where we set up the system prompt and also the user prompt. To add evaluation sets over on the left-hand side under agent, let's click into evaluation sets. Over on the right-hand side, let's click on create, and right here, let's create a new evaluation set. Let's create two evaluations in this set, one invoice that's under $500 and another invoice that's over $500 to see how our agent handles it. Right down here, let's click on add to set. Let's start by adding a sample invoice that's under $500 where we would approve this invoice. Up on top, I'll give this evaluation a name and I'll call this approve. Next, I can define the input or the sample data that will feed in. Right here, I need to enter in the invoice date. I'll enter in a date, the vendor name, Cookie Supply Co., one of my favorite vendors, and right down here, I'll also type in an invoice number. Lastly, we could also type in an invoice amount. Let's set this for $480. Last, we can define the status that we expect. Well, for the status, I expect it to be approved, so I'll type in approve, and for the reason, it's within the limit. Then let's click on save. Let's set up one more where the invoice amount is over $500, in which case we would need to review it. Just like we did, let's click on add to set, and this opens up the pane over on the right-hand side. Let's type in review as the name, and over here we could enter in the invoice date, the vendor name, and also the invoice number. Then for the invoice amount, let's set it to, let's say $10,000. For the status, we'll set it to review, and for the reason, it is over limit. Then let's click on save. Of course, you can always go in and you can add more test cases, but for now, I think this is good enough. Right up on top, let's now click on evaluate set. And here it looks like it finished running. Now, as some context, UiPath runs the agent against each scenario that we defined, and it compares the actual outputs to the ones that we expected. So let's see how it did. I'll click into this, and here we see the two different test cases that we set up. Now, the first one, we expect it to come back and say that we need to review the invoice. So let's click into this, and over on the right-hand side, we see a pane. Here we see all the input that we provided, and here we also mark down what we're expecting to get back. So will the agent return what we're expecting? Well, let's scroll down a little bit, and here we can see what's expected. So we expected it to say over limit, and here the agent came back and said over limit. So that checks out. Here we see status is review, and the agent came back and said status review. So it gave the exact result that we were expecting. So this worked out well. Now let's look at the other one. This is approve. We're expecting it to approve the invoice. Here we're expecting it to be within limit and to be approved, and here the agent returns that back. Now this is a really nice way to verify that your agent is making consistent, rule-based decisions before you publish your agent and connect it to your larger project. Now that we've verified that the agent's working how we expect it to, let's jump back into the agentic process. Over on the left-hand side in the Project Explorer, let's click back into the overall process. Now that the agent has finished its analysis, we're going to use a gateway to branch the workflow. If the status is approve, then we're going to move the file to an approved folder in Google Drive. Otherwise, we're going to send it to a human to review. This is where the AI reasoning happens. The agent takes all the structured data from the RPA workflow. Then it applies all the different rules we gave it, and then it makes a decision just like a human would. To insert a gateway, let's click on Invoice Decision Agents. Right up here, we get this overlay. And this option right here allows us to add a gateway. Let's click on that, and that inserts it directly onto the canvas. This opens up a pane over on the right-hand side, and we could give the gateway a name. I'll call this approve or review. Now, if the agent decides to approve the invoice, we need to set up a branch that the invoice will follow. So with the gateway selected, we have this overlay, and let's insert another task. I'll click on this. Over on the right-hand side, let's give this task a name. I'm going to call this approve. Then right down here, we can choose the action, and we have a number of different options. Let's go down to execute connector activity. This lets the process call the Google Drive connector directly in the cloud so we can move the file with a single action. There's no robot, no UI clicks, just a simple API call behind the scenes. Next, we need to choose the connector, and I want to use Google Drive, so let's type that in and then select this option. Right down here, we can use the connection that we established earlier. Right here, we need to choose the activity. I'll click on this. Now, we want to move the file. So here, I'll scroll down and I see the option for move file or folder. I'll select that. Then if we go down a little bit more, we have to choose the file or the folder to move. Let's click on this. And let's actually go over here to see more, or show more, and we want to use one of the variables. We don't want to use the folder picker. We want to reference the file that we got at the very beginning of this flow. So let's select variables, and here we see all the different stages in our process. Now let's go down to new invoice uploaded. I'll go down, and here we have new invoice uploaded, and here we have the variable that we created with the file ID. This references the specific file that we want to move. So I'll select that. Next, we also have to select a destination folder. Before I select this, let's jump into Google Drive to make sure that that folder exists. Here in Google Drive, let's now create that folder. Over here, I'll right-click, and we have the option to create a new folder. I'll click on that, and let's call this approved. If an invoice is approved, we'll move it to this folder. Over here, let's click on create. Now that we have a new folder, let's jump back into UiPath to direct invoices that are approved to this folder. Back in UiPath, over on the right-hand side, let's now select the destination folder. I'll click on this, and here I see my drive. Let's expand that. And right here, we see invoices. Let's expand that. And there I see my new approved folder. I'll click on this and then click on save. And there we see the destination folder. Next, we also need to indicate what should happen if the file already exists. If it exists, I'll set it to replace the file. Now, everything else looks good, and this approved stage is now set up. Next, we need to configure the gateway so it sends approved invoices to this task. Let's click into the gateway, and right down here we see conditions, and there's currently one condition because we have one task connected to this gateway. Let's expand this, and right here we can give it a label. Let's call this approved, and right down below we can indicate what the condition should be. Let's click on this over on the right-hand side, and let's use the C# expression editor to set up our condition. To send an invoice to our approved task, we need to check the status that we get back from the agent, and we need the status to be approve. So right up on top, let's start by inserting a variable, and let's collapse some of these different categories. We want to find output from the invoice decision agent, and here I see the agent. And we have all these different variables. Right here, I see the status that we get back. So let's click on that. Right now, that's inserted the status. And I want to check if the status is set to approve. So here, I'll type in approve. This all now looks good. So in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on save. Now, if the agent decides to approve an invoice, it'll send it through to the approve step, where we'll automatically move the invoice into an approved folder in Google Drive. Pretty cool. For invoices that the AI agent flags for review, let's create what's called a human-in-the-loop task. What this means is that the flow will flag this invoice for a human to manually review. With the gateway selected, let's go up to the overlay, and here we could add another task. Let's click on that, and there we see a new task. For the task name, right up here, I'll simply call this review. Then let's go down to the action dropdown, and we have a number of different options. We want to create a review app, and right up here we have the option for create action app task. Let's select that one. For the action, click into here, and we don't yet have an app, so we need to create one. Just like we've been doing all along, let's click on this plus resource button. This opens up a dialog where we can create a new action app. And right down here, I think this simple approval template will work. So let's click on this one, and down below, let's click on select. This drops us into a low-code app editor. And the beautiful thing about using a template is it's mostly all configured for us. We don't have to make any modifications here. The one thing we will need to do, though, is we have this section for content for review. And we need to make sure that we feed in all the different invoice details, along with the status and the reason for review. But we're going to do that back on the agentic process screen. So everything with this app looks good. So over on the left-hand side in the Project Explorer, let's click back on this. On the canvas, make sure that review is selected. And over here, we can give the task a title. I'll call this review. And right down here, we can define what the inputs are. So here we have the content. Let's click on this icon over on the right-hand side. And then let's select the C# editor. This opens up a dialog where we can now feed in information into the app so a reviewer can decide whether to approve or reject an invoice. So let's start out by typing in the vendor name. This is the first bit of information that I want to feed in. Then we need to insert a variable with the vendor's name. I'll enter in a plus symbol, and up on top, we can insert a variable and we can go through and find it. But an even easier way is you could type in VARS for variable dot, and then you could start typing in the variable name. So here I called it invoice vendor name. There I see the variable, and I'll select that. Now I'll do the exact same thing for all the other variables that I want to pass in. I also want to pass in the invoice number, the date, the total amount, the status, and the reason, and I followed the exact same process as what I did for this first variable along with that name. This now all looks good, so in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save. We've now configured all of the different inputs for this step, and down below you can see that we automatically get some outputs back from this template. One of them is the action, and this will contain one of two values. Either the manual or human approver approves it, or they reject it. So let's start by building out the approval path. And here again, we have to make a decision, approve or reject. So click on the review step in the flowchart, and right over here, let's add another gateway. I'll click here, and there's our gateway. If a reviewer approves the invoice, well, then we want to move it to this step where we move the invoice to the approved folder in Google Drive. So over here, let's select the gateway, and here we could draw a line and connect it to the approved stage. Over on the right-hand side, we now need to add a condition. So basically, we need to say when the invoice should go to this approved step. Right over here, let's expand the conditions. And in the label, let's call this approved. Down below, we also need to define the condition for when an invoice will move in this direction. Let's click over here on Show More. And then let's use the C# expression editor. Within this dialog, we could insert the variable. Now we could look for it, or we could simply type it in. I'll type in VARS to select a variable. And then this one is called action. Right here, I see it at the top of the list, so let's select that. Now, I want to check if the action says approve. Let me type that in, and then in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save. We also need to set up a step for an invoice that's rejected. So let's click on the gateway again, and we're going to add another task. I'll click on that. And for this one, I'll call it rejected. This is going to be very similar to this other step that we set up, but instead of moving an invoice to the approved folder, we're going to move it to a rejected folder. Let's click back into here. And for the action, we'll select the same action that we chose for this other step, which is to execute connector activity. I'll select that. And then we have to choose the connector. Here too, I'll type in Google Drive and then select that. Here it finds the connection, and then we have to choose an activity. We want to move the file, so let's select that right there. Then let's scroll down a little bit more. Next, we need to indicate what file we would like to move, and that's the ID of the file. So over here, let's click on this icon, and then we're going to select a variable. We're going to select the file ID from the very first step where we detect that there's now a new invoice. Here we have new invoice uploaded. And right over here, we see the variable that we created, the file ID. I'll select that, and that now assigns it into this field. Next, we need to choose a destination folder. Let's jump over into Google Drive and create a rejected folder. Here in Google Drive, I'll right-click and let's go with New Folder, and I'll call this Rejected, and then click on Create. And there's our folder. Let's now jump back into UiPath. Back within UiPath, we can now specify the destination folder. I'll click on the file picker. Over here, I'll select My Drive. Right over here, we have Invoices. And then let's click on Rejected and click on Save to assign that folder. Right down here, we also need to decide what should happen if the file already exists. I'll click on this dropdown and let's select Replace. Everything else looks good. You'll notice that there's a red line between the gateway and the rejected task. We need to add a condition in the gateway so rejected invoices get sent to this task. Let's click back onto the gateway. This opens up the gateway properties, and over on the right-hand side, you can see that we currently have an approved condition, and we now need to add a rejected condition. So let's expand this, and let's give it a label. I'll call this rejected. Then we also have to specify the condition for when an invoice should go down this path. Let's click over here on the right-hand side and open up the C# expression editor. Within this dialog, up on top, let's start by inserting a variable. This opens up all of the different variables in this project, and we want to look for one with the action is set to rejected. So here, let's scroll down, and I see a review section, and here we have the action variable. I'll select this. Then we want to check if it's equal to rejected. So over here, I'll type in rejected, and that now all looks good. So in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save. Looking at the canvas, we also need to set up a condition for this gateway for us to review. So let's click into this gateway, and over here, let's open up this category. And you'll notice that we haven't set this up yet. So for the label, let's call this review. And down below, just like we did, let's open up the C# expression editor to add the condition. Let's go up to Insert Variable up on top, and here let's minimize some of these categories. Here we have the invoice decision agent, and it sends back the status. So over here, let's select the status, and then let's check to see if it equals review. Then in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save. And that completes the full flow. Down below, let's click on this to fit to view. And let's zoom out just a little bit so we can see the entire flow end to end. Here we have a new invoice is uploaded. We download and extract the invoice details. Then we have an agent make a decision on what we should do with that invoice. If we approve it, we move the invoice to an approved folder. If it requires human review, here we send it down to an app where a human can review it. If the human approves it, well, then we move that invoice to an approved folder. And if the human rejects it, then we'll move it to a rejected folder on Google Drive. Now that everything's connected, let's test the full flow with 2 sample invoices. Let's now test it out to make sure that it's working as expected. Let's jump over to Google Drive and upload an invoice. Here I am in Google Drive, and I've uploaded an invoice that's under $500, so it should be approved. It also contains all of the other required information. Again, if you'd like to test this out as well, I've included a link to this invoice in the description of this video. Now that we've uploaded this invoice, let's jump back into UiPath. Back within UiPath, in the top left-hand corner, let's click on Debug. Down in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save and Debug. The cool thing now is you can follow the progress here in the execution trail in Studio Web. It'll show each step from downloading the file to extracting the data to the AI agent making its decision, and you can see how it flows through this entire process. And here we can see that the flow ran successfully. Let's now jump into Google Drive to check that it moved the invoice. Here I am in Google Drive. Let's click into Approved, and there's the invoice that was approved. Perfect. Let's now click back into Invoices, and this time we're going to upload an invoice that requires reviewing. So over here, I'll take a new invoice and I'll upload it. This one has a total amount due greater than 500. If you'd like to follow along, I've included a link to this PDF down below in the description. Let's now jump back into UiPath to test out the flow. Here we are back in UiPath. Before we can test the review flow, we have to turn on something called the Action Center. It's not turned on by default. In the top left-hand corner, let's click on the waffle menu, and then let's go into the Admin Center. Within the Admin Center, let's click on the default tenant, and over here, let's click on Services. Then in the top right-hand corner, let's click on Add Services, and here we see the option for Actions. Check that, and in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Add. Now that we've turned on Actions, let's go back to Studio. Up on top, let's click on the Product Launcher, and let's click into Studio. Right here, let's click into our project. Let's now try debugging. Right up on top, I'll click on Debug. And right in the bottom right-hand corner, let's click on Save and Debug. Right here, you'll notice that the agent analyzed the invoice and it detected that it was larger than the auto approval amount, in which case we need a human to step in and review the invoice. So how do we do that? Well, right down here, we can see the execution trail and it says review, it's a user task. I'll click on that, and right over here under details, you'll see an option to open the app task. Let's click on that. This opens up the app form that we built, and here I see all of the different content from the invoice that we could now review. Right up on top, I'll assign this to myself. That way I can now either approve or reject this invoice. Now, I'm not so sure about this. We usually don't have invoices that are this large, so I think I'm going to reject it. Down below, I'll click on Reject. And right up above, I'll now complete this task. Back within Studio Web, we can see that it ran successfully. Let's now jump into Google Drive. And look at that. It appears that the invoice has been moved. Let's click into Rejected, and there's our invoice. Once everything is tested and working, the last step is to publish the agentic process so it can run on its own. Up at the very top, let's now click on Publish. UiPath packages the entire solution, the agentic process, the RPA workflow, and the human review app, and it'll deploy it to the cloud. This all looks good. Down below, let's click on Publish. From now on, whenever someone uploads a new invoice to Google Drive, this process will automatically kick off, extract the data, make a decision, and handle approvals end to end. And that's it. We've built a complete UiPath automation that combines AI agents, RPA, and human in the loop, all working together in one seamless flow. When we publish this project, UiPath automatically sends it to UiPath Orchestrator. To get there, click on the top left-hand corner and then select Orchestrator in this menu. You could think of Orchestrator as the control room for all your automations. From here, you can schedule runs, track execution history, and see detailed logs for every job. It's also where you can manage assets, credentials, and connections for services like Google Drive or Outlook. In this example, after publishing, you'll see the automation listed as a process inside Orchestrator. That means it's fully deployed and ready to run on its own whenever a new invoice arrives in Google Drive. Essentially, Orchestrator takes care of all the background work, deploying, monitoring, and scaling your automations, so you could focus on building and improving them. And that's our completed workflow. Once this process runs a few times, you can see how it performs through UiPath Maestro. What I love about UiPath is how everything works together. You have AI agents, robots, and people all orchestrated through Maestro. It's a great example of how agentic automation is evolving. It's not just robots clicking buttons anymore. It's about combining reasoning, action, and human judgment in one seamless flow. If you want to keep experimenting, Try adding new rules, connecting more systems, or building your own agents. The possibilities are huge. Thanks for watching, and if you found this helpful, don't forget to subscribe for more UiPath tutorials and automation projects.